Now let's look for a few minutes at the Liberal Hall of Shame for 2015 to 2021. Liberal MP William Amos was caught twice on House Zoom proceedings in indecent possessions. Liberal MP Yasmin Ratanzi was wrongfully employing her sister with taxpayers' dollars and deliberately hiding this information from Canadians. Liberal MP Ramesh Sangha was removed from the Liberal caucus in January of 2021 after he accused multiple other Liberal MPs of supporting the Khalistani movement. Liberal MP Darshan Singh Kang had to leave the Liberal caucus in 2015 over accusations of sexual harassment. Liberal MP Nicola Di Lorio didn't show up for work for a year after he announced his resignation in 2018. Then the public found out, oh, he actually didn't resign. He still collected his salary as an MP, even if he was working full-time in a law firm in Montreal. To this day, this situation has never been clearly explained by Trudeau and the Liberals. Liberal MP Raj Grewal admitted he racked up millions of dollars in debts playing casino blackjack and ended up resigning from the Liberal caucus in 2018 after the news came to light, following an RCMP investigation. But after suddenly announcing he had paid off his seven-figure debts, he stayed on as a member of Parliament for the rest of the parliamentary session. You may recall that Mr. Grewal was already under investigation by the Federal Ethics Commissioner at the time and was later found guilty of being in violation of conflict of interest. Then there was Liberal MP Marwin Tabara. He was allowed to run again for the Liberal Party in 2019 election, even though detailed allegations of sexual harassment had been made against him. After being arrested in April 2020, he remained in caucus for almost 2 months because the Prime Minister's office claimed they knew nothing about it. Took a newspaper article for the Liberals to kick him out of caucus. Then former Liberal MP Frank Baylis signed one of those juicy sole source contracts with the Liberal government during the COVID epidemic. He received $237 million. Public Health Agency figures disclose that more than 90% of the 10,000 Baylis Medical Company ventilators it bought were never used in any clinic or any hospital. Sadly, these ethical lapses were even worse amongst cabinet ministers. Let me give you a few examples. As there are many, I will go in alphabetical order. Anita Anand's husband was the recipient of one of those juicy COVID contracts. Life Labs received tens of millions of dollars of COVID contracts. They sell test kits. Anita Anand's husband, John Knowlton, is a director of Life Labs. The Life Labs division has received multiple contracts worth millions since Anand was elected to the Parliament in 2019. Navdeep Bains was industry minister and as such promised to crack down on big telcos who overcharge Canadians for internet and cell phone service. Guess what? He found a job at Rogers after leaving the government. The lobbying commissioner said she was frustrated at this, but Liberals will always find loopholes that means more money for them. Then there was Bill Blair. On several occasions, lied, meddled into the work of the RCMP regarding the worst mass killing in the history of Canada in Portapique, Nova Scotia. While he was the president of the Treasury Board, Scott Bryson tried to block approval for the contract of a Navy supply ship being built at the Navy shipyard in Quebec because he was lobbied to do so by New Brunswick powerful Irving family, owners of the rival Halifax shipyard. Minister Bryson also tried to argue there was no need for him to set up a conflict of interest screen to prevent him from participating in government decisions involving two of Atlantic Canada's wealthiest families. Even though he used to chair one of their investment firms, and that his spouse continued to sit on the company's board of directors. Francois Philippe Champagne owned 2 apartments in London, England, worth millions of dollars. His mortgages were with a Chinese bank. Strange indeed for a Canadian in the UK, Canadian MP in the UK, to have to go to a Chinese bank for a mortgage. Judy Foote got involved in the Frank Norman affair. I will talk about that in a bit. But what is interesting here is that she resigned for health reasons. But suddenly, her health improved, and she was rewarded with the job of Lieutenant Governor in Newfoundland and Labrador. Stephen Guilbeault forgot to pay his taxes, but he never forgot to travel, especially to China. This minister is running around the globe, busy lecturing Canadians, but patting Chinese or Gulf Emirates officials on the back. Catherine McKenna and John Wilkinson, his predecessors at Environment, were of the same ilk, jetting around the world to lecture the common folks that they should bicycle to work. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly's office staff didn't read an email that said her department was sending a representative to a Russian embassy party. So we had a representative at a party drinking vodka with the Russian officials just after Putin invaded Ukraine. Not reading their emails is a hallmark of Trudeau ministers and their staff. It was the excuse given by Bill Blair and Marco Mendicino and, of course, Justin Trudeau. When David Lametti was turfed from cabinet, a lot of people wondered why. He had actually, after all, done much of Trudeau's bidding, we thought. Well, in the last few weeks, we learned that Lametti cancelled a verdict of first-degree murder against Jacques Delisle, a former judge, even if all the experts were against this decision. Lametti and the government refused to come clean on why he did that, even though Delisle later pleaded guilty to manslaughter. You all heard Senators' non-answers to our questions on this issue. What about Dominique LeBlanc, who, despite connection to the powerful Irving family, was appointed to be Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard? He had to consult with the Ethics Commissioner for weeks in order to figure out how to stick handle around this very obvious conflict of interest. Then there was a time when Minister LeBlanc flew from Moncton to Montreal and back aboard a jet owned by J.D. Irving Limited. Nothing to see here, folks. But when the Ethics Commissioner, Mario Dion, found Minister LeBlanc guilty of breaking a Conflict of Interest Act because he awarded a lucrative Arctic surf clam license to a company linked to his wife's cousin, he couldn't wiggle out of that. Speaking of Dominique LeBlanc and Scott Bryson, we still don't know what their exact role was in the Vice Admiral Norman affair. The Liberals tried to renege on a contract for a supply ship in order to give it back to the Irvings. When they got caught, they decided they would get the head of Vice Admiral Norman. The Prime Minister even sent him to trial before the police had investigated its investigation. Scott Bryson and Judy Foote left their positions, and taxpayers ended up being invoiced for an undisclosed sum of money paid out to Vice Admiral Norman. That is a first-class cover-up. Marco Mendicino's case was hopeless. Conflicts of interest, emails not read, bold lies in public, pure incompetence. When you are so bad that even Justin Trudeau thinks you're bad, you've hit the bottom. Someday I will have a speech just on Marco Mendicino scandals. I may need my unlimited time for that. It happens that ministers organize fundraisers outside their ridings, but when you represent a downtown Montreal riding, this is strange. It is even stranger if this fundraiser happens to be in New York, USA. To my knowledge, that is the first, and this honor belongs to Mark Miller. Marianne Monsef had to admit that she was actually not born in Afghanistan, as she had told people and led people to believe for years. Bill Morneau is another minister who was scandal-prone. He started his political career with violating the Elections Act, for which he was fined. This is, after all, the same finance minister who forgot that he had and forgot to declare his villa in France in his ethics reporting. This is the same finance minister who sponsored Bill C-27, which happened to increase the value of pensions sold by the minister's own company, Morneau Shepell. When the bill was tabled in the House of Commons, the value of Morneau Shepell shares jumped, and Minister Morneau just happened to still be holding $21 million worth of shares. And as I already mentioned, his role in the We Charity scandal, when he quit, he pretended he was going to the OECD top position. No one knows for sure if this was true. One thing is true and is real. Taxpayers footed the bill for his failed campaign. I still have an order paper question on the true cost, still unanswered after 25 months. It was reported in the media that this phony campaign cost at least $11 million. Mary Ng was found guilty by the Ethics Commissioner for giving contracts to her best friend. In a Trudeau government, that means you pretend to be sorry, and that has no consequences. How about Seamus O'Regan? The government spent $180,000 defending him in a defamation suit. And do you remember Hunter Tutu? He had to leave cabinet to deal with, sadly, addiction issues. But what was strange was when he said that Justin Trudeau had hugged him after he revealed that he had an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. Harjit Sajjan was found to have lied about his role in Afghanistan. But this happy bunch knows how to organize a party. Sorry, a cabinet retreat. The 3 affordability retreats held in Charlottetown, Vancouver, and Hamilton between 2022 and August 2023 cost $1,325,000. Hey, life is better with lobster and white wine, especially when you are discussing affordability. It's not surprising to see all those ethical lapses. After all, this is the leader of an organization who sets the tone. Justin Trudeau does not believe the rules of ethics apply to him. So how could he insist that his officials, his MPs, and his ministers be any better? In 2015, we learned that Justin Trudeau was billing charities for speaking engagements, even as an MP. This was a first, colleagues, a sitting politician who charges people to hear him speak. When he got caught, he said he was sorry and wrote a check. A few weeks later, he was caught again. He had charged the House of Commons for expenses that had also been reimbursed by the organizations to which he spoke. Again, we had the "I'm sorry, here's a check" routine. This was a preview of things to come. Who can forget the "thank you for your donation" comment and incident where the PM's elitist and condescending attitude was on full display when he jeered at an Indigenous protester before that? Before that, we had Elbowgate, when Justin Trudeau pushed aside fellow MP Ruth Ellen Brosso because he was in a hurry to vote. His time was more precious than others, and pushing aside women who get in the way is something our fake feminist Prime Minister does without hesitation. That was in line with Justin Trudeau's behavior in the Kokanee grope incident, where he groped a female journalist. Then he said, "Oh my, I would not have done this had I known that the woman was a national reporter." I guess in his mind it's more acceptable to grope a person that is not a national reporter than one that is. Now, we all remember, of course, that our Prime Minister decided that this was indeed a lesson, not just for him, but for all of us. We all know that some people experience things differently, he said. Now, let's not forget the 3, 4, 5, maybe more incidents where Justin Trudeau wore blackface, because he thought it was funny to pretend that he was black. We don't know how many times he did that because he can't remember.